to the Grey Man Podcast. This retired counter-terrorism agent, lifelong martial artist, and personal defense expert joins his best friend, producer Jim, to talk about personal defense and world events. This is The Grey Man, Mike Syme.
Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of The Grey Man. It's a big milestone for us. The hosting service that we use will say that this is episode 11 because we put up that audio nugget one. Well, producer Jim put up the audio nugget one.
What am I going to do after, like, I'm out of, well, I guess I get to 21 officially, but like, okay, all right, yeah. Is there a way to manipulate, like I can use one more image?
We're going to get arrested.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yeah, well, we might have to not use Facebook or
the books of the face.
Yeah, but no, good. So this is so exciting. Mike and I were talking as we were getting set up to get started here. It's been 2 weeks because last week's episode was recorded the previous week.
Mm-hmm.
Last week we were in South Dakota at this time as we normally record, and so we were figuring out how to do all this stuff and just kind of going through the motions and forgetting how some of this works, but we had 2 episodes last week. We had the truth we're going to talk about, and we don't have, because of how this played out, we don't have a lot of recap for the past couple of shows. So if we missed anything, if there's any more feedback, as always, life happens, and we appreciate folks are listening to this maybe weeks, months, years down the road. We're always happy to go back and revisit some stuff. So we don't really have much to talk about there, but we want to dive in. This week's show, we've had a lot of chatter. People are excited about what we're planning to talk about in world events today.
Truth.
Before we get there, a little bit of a recap, I guess. The first thing, our free ride this week, unanimous, quick decision on who we want to give a shout out to. This is a free advertisement until we find somebody that is as crazy as we are and has a lot of money, which that would be awesome. But in the meantime, it's a free ride, and we just want to show appreciation for brands and for places that might appreciate some support as well. And Mike and I stayed, just by pure chance, we stayed at a place called Cedarwood Inn. Mike found it online in Deadwood, South Dakota, and it was a fantastic experience. The rooms were adequate. They gave everything that especially a couple of individual guys would need. We each had our own room, and we had our quiet time there, and a small little bathroom. It's just real basic. But the thing that was really cool, it was essentially a mom and pop place. If you think about just a family-owned, really friendly couple. I assume they were a couple. I guess I never saw them, doing anything that would indicate they were married. But it was a guy and a gal. They were really friendly. They were informative. They gave us a few insights about, hey, if you're going to ride this trail, make sure, or this highway, make sure to go this direction so you see it better. So fantastic people, and so the Cedarwood Inn in Deadwood, South Dakota. Other places were full up. They were already booked. This place is 3-4 blocks off of the main, the main historic old.
Still walking distance from the historical center of Deadwood. Still walking distance. And
there's a trolley for $1 that gets you anywhere. So I guess
$1 Charlie.
One day I heard from this gal that I was talking about when we checked in. Mike was chatting with her, and I heard her say, you got to give Charlie $1 and he'll get you anywhere, but he doesn't have change. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, Charlie seems like a good time. I guess we're going to find Charlie and spend dollars, but that's not trolley. Trolley is what she was. Oh, the trolley, not the Charlie, in Deadwood, South Dakota.
It was the ownership and the people that stayed in the Cedarwood Inn that made that just a fantastic experience. We got a chance to sit down in the courtyard at the picnic table or on the benches and talk to a bunch of people coming through, families and motorcyclists, and just a fantastic experience. I cannot recommend that place enough.
So, yeah, and again, if you're a douchebag or an asshole, don't stay there, because that would ruin the experience. But So for what it's worth, here we go. The Cedarwood Inn in Deadwood, South Dakota has no affiliation with the Gray Man podcast, does not condone our activities, very likely doesn't know we exist, but we like them and they get this free exposure for what it's worth. And we had a great time in Deadwood. Mike and I took a few days, so it was like 6 hours from Bismarck. Mike came down to Bismarck from Minot, so that's an hour and a half, 2 hours. The night before, Friday, we did the ride down. Beautiful, except for that one stretch of about 2-3 hours of just nothing. And when people talk
Belfield, North Dakota to Belfouche, South Dakota, you could fall asleep if your bike would stay upright. You could fall asleep and never go off the road.
People talk about how boring North Dakota is. That's the spot they're talking about, because everything else, as far as I'm concerned, there's some beauty to it. And I'm sure there is there too, but as a couple of guys just trying to get someplace, it was just a means to an end, and we eventually did end it and get where we were going. A couple of great rides, some amazing experiences. I got to see some family down there. Mike and I had some homemade ice cream at some of my in-laws. It was a beautiful trip. So I can't express how grateful I am to have that opportunity. Mike and I had the fellowship that we needed. We both got some poison out of our head that had been festering, and that's really what it's all about. And just enjoyed 2 breakfasts per day and at least 1 ice cream per day. Also very
Yeah, first and second breakfast. Very well. Riders get ice cream though. We have a rule.
Yes.
Riders get ice cream. So if you're out there and you ride motorcycles, remember that riders get ice cream daily. Very important.
Yes, it's not an option, it's a requirement.
That's true. I don't make the rules. We just got to follow them.
Exactly.
I don't make the rules.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Yep, it was a fantastic sabbatical for us both to just decompress from life. There are very few things in life that help me do that. Riding is definitely one of them. Shooting, range time is another one. Jiu-jitsu, we've talked about that before. But riding, there's something that riding gives me that jiu-jitsu and shooting does not. And it was awesome to have that opportunity. And I'm already looking forward to next year's trip. And we got a year.
We've already got a couple places that we're thinking of. Yep. One thing, so for me on these rides, it's become a habit or it's become part of the ride for me to find an audiobook to listen to when we're going through those 3 hours of nothing, whatever ride we're on. And this one, Mike recommended this book to me, and I don't know if we've talked about it here yet, Mike, but Fortitude by Dan
Crenshaw,
yeah. Absolutely one of the best books I've read. It's very contemporary. He talks about things that were happening less than a year ago in this book that I'm listening to. And if you don't know his story, his book talks about it. You can find him online. He's a congressman out of Texas and has a lot more to his life than just that. And I would, if you like anything that we talk about in this podcast, or if you hate everything about this podcast, that book would be a fantastic read or listen for you as well. So there's another recommendation from this humble producer.
Well, and Jim and I have talked about putting a Gray Man podcast reading list together. I mean, we both are, I would say, average readers, right?
Right. Yeah, I like to read. We've got a few that we've shared. We diverge in a couple of ways, but yeah.
And a lot of them have been very impactful in our life. I believe that all leaders are readers, but not all readers are leaders. So if you're looking to be a leader in your home, you need continual education on leadership and mentorship and life and all of these things. And I have a very large list of ones that I would recommend. I know Jim has a list as well. And so we're going to start throwing those up probably about maybe one a month or so. We're kind of mulling that idea around. Let us know what you think on the Facebook page and on YouTube and all of our mediums. Please also, one last thing before we get into the meat and potatoes of today. Thank you for everybody who's given us a review on the platforms they listen to. If you're out there in podcast land and you like us, if you could do us a favor and you have not written a review yet, please, please, please go do it. And if you could, please do it on Apple Podcast. If you give us a review on Apple Podcast, it helps us get more viability for viewership. The more reviews you have, the easier it is for them to start featuring you on pages and things like that where people might run across your podcast. So if you're out there and you're a listener of ours, please go on to Apple Podcasts, throw in an honest, unbiased review of ours, trust me, we're good boys. We can take it. And we just want to get the word out there. If you appreciate what we say, whether you always agree with us or not, please go ahead and put a review out for us.
Cool. All right. Well, that's I guess that would be about the third free plug. We'll call that.
Yeah. Sorry.
To get, well, and part of that is we're ramping up, you guys. So if you're listening now, at whatever point, we had this idea. I think before we left on the trip, maybe when we got back, that there's a lot going on. I think world events would be an appropriate discussion to have, and that was my suggestion back to Mike, and his immediate response was yes. And I think all caps and many extra letters, and so I know Mike is very excited to dive into this, and my role is going to be to cut him off when we get to a certain point. and I started talking about this right as we were getting ready to roll tape. Boy, that's old school. But as I was getting ready to push record, I started to tell Mike, and I said, no, I'm going to wait and just bring this up here. My perspective on world events, and we've talked about this some, is so different from Mike's. And it occurred to me as we were preparing for the show today that one of the reasons Mike loves to do the research and loves to find out the truth, and my way of handling that as a guy that deals with depression and being overwhelmed, one of the ways that I deal with that, for better or for worse, is just to stay the fuck out of it. How long have I avoided Facebook? There are days I'll go without, I just don't want to touch the news. And there's a level of guilt and shame that goes into that because I am not taking responsibility then. So that's a very personal side of what we're going to be talking about today. And I don't bring that up to change the discussion points. But when our listeners and viewers are observing how we view things differently, I just wanted to give that little bit of insight. Mike's going to be talking about things that are happening that probably most people are much more familiar with than me for that. And that's just how I deal with those feelings and that dysfunction sometimes. So that's why it's easy for me to sometimes ask questions that maybe others have either already gone through or might be from a completely different perspective, because I'm not immersed in the world of social media and just media as others might be. So there you go. There's my personal intake on it, and your introduction, Mike, into how the world has gone to hell in a handbasket in the last couple of weeks.
The world is a crazy place. The thing, I talk about this with people all the time, that it's not like violence has just occurred randomly in the United States within the last 10 years. It's been a violent world since man was created. And in the last half of the 20th century, and certainly this first 20 years of the 21st century, right, has been quite violent across the globe. And in 2020, man, it should literally be a four-letter word. We've had typhoons and hurricanes and earthquakes and pandemics, and we're still at war, lest people forget. The longest running war in American history. We're still there. We're still sending boys and girls over there. We've got civil unrest, and it's just kind of crazy. We've got an election this year that's causing all kinds of nonsense. So you take all of that, and then we pull one incident out of that and dissect it. And for me, that kind of sums up where Americans are at right now, because there's two very, very different camps when it comes to this incident that we're going to talk about. And they're very polarized, right? And so I have a personal opinion. When we talk about this incident, though, when I give you the initial analysis, I'm going to give an unbiased initial analysis based on the facts as we know them right now. Okay, so we are actually going to talk about the shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, involving Mr. Jacob Blake and police officers. Mr. Jacob Blake was shot 7 times by officers, and that immediately made the news because Mr. Jacob Blake is black and the officers were white. And the headlines immediately screamed, "White officers shoot unarmed black man." That was the very first thing that I saw. Of course, for me, in my line of work, obviously I'm gonna go look at that and read through it. And people immediately lost their mind over that, knowing that the media is biased to begin with and is going to put a headline up that is meant to be inflammatory. There was no substance in that article or the initial articles or some subsequent articles from media outlets, but people have used that to set Kenosha, Wisconsin on fire. Mm-hmm. And so here are the facts of the case. I feel like that was a show at one point. Somebody said that.
We could make that.
Yeah, we could. Here's the facts of the case. Mr. Jacob Blake was shot 7 times by police officers, and initially they said he was unarmed. But the facts are that the police in Kenosha, Wisconsin got a call on 911 from a frantic female stating that someone was trying to steal her keys and her vehicle. Police officers were then dispatched to said location. En route, police officers were notified by 10 code, and each place has a different 10 code, but for us, it would be 1099. They would say that the individual has an active warrant for their arrest. So en route, they were notified that Mr. Blake had an active warrant, an active felony warrant for his arrest. And when the officers asked what the warrant was for, they were told that it was for sexual assault and domestic violence. So officers in the vehicle responding to a scene for a domestic where the individual calling said that someone was trying to steal her vehicle are notified that the individual that is going to steal the vehicle has an active felony warrant for sexual assault and domestic violence. For me, that would automatically change how we approach it. But that's the circumstances for the officers going into the scene. When they arrive and they interact with Mr. Blake is resistive immediately. He becomes combative, fights the officers, at one point puts one in a headlock. The officers tase him twice, which he recovers from. Mr. Blake grabs a knife that was on his person that the individual officers did not see initially. And as he goes to get back in his vehicle with knife in hand, they shoot him 7 times. The news article will also say that he had his 3 sons in the vehicle. To me, absolutely immaterial to the incident at hand. So the facts of the case: police respond to a 911 call of an attempted vehicle being stolen in a domestic dispute. The subject, or the suspect as we refer to him, the suspect has an active felony warrant for sexual assault and domestic violence. When they arrive, suspect is combative immediately with them, does not comply, fights, wrestles with the officers, resists 2 taser attempts, grabs a knife and tries to, from his person, retrieves a knife from off of his person that the officers don't see, and then tries to get back and runs back to his vehicle where officers shoot him.
All right.
And immediately, without any of that information, the headline is white officers shoot unarmed black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and BLM and Antifa show up and start burning the city. So that being the facts.
All right.
Let's talk about the breakdown of it, right? As a police officer responding to a scene where I am told by dispatch that the suspect has active felony warrants, one for sexual assault and one for domestic violence, I can logically posture myself to confront a possibly combative suspect because there's a history of it, or there wouldn't be a warrant issued for it. And I'm responding to a domestic dispute. So I'm going to, even if there wasn't a warrant, I would assume that there's a possibility of combativeness. When I get there, the individual, the suspect, is immediately combative with me, and I don't care. I don't care what his background is and why he doesn't like police. I literally don't give a shit. As an officer, when I show up, I look at that incident and what dispatch tells me. And if dispatch tells me you have a felony warrant for those 2 things and I show up and you're an asshole to me, I'm automatically going to go on the offensive. And when I try to get you to calm down, or I try to put hands on you and you fight me and you wrestle me, well, then I'm going to go up the force continuum, right? The first 4, officer presence, verbal commands, non-lethal or less than lethal, which would be your baton, your ASP, or your taser, things like that, and then lethal, which is your firearm. Just so everybody out there is aware, I do not, under any circumstance, have to go through each step of the force continuum to use the next level. I don't have to be officer present, then verbal commands, and then non-lethal, and then lethal to shoot somebody. I can show up, you can automatically pull a firearm, and I will kill you, right? Or you could pull a baseball bat, and I will kill you, because you can kill me with a baseball bat. You can kill me with a knife. You can kill me with a brick. You can kill me by beating me to death with a skateboard, which we'll get to next.
All right.
after we discuss this incident, right? I can hammer, pick something up, a tire iron. You have a weapon in your hand and you're threatening me. I do not have to give you verbal commands. I don't have to tase you. I can automatically go to my firearm, which is the next higher level of force, because you have demonstrated a willingness to use lethal force by having a weapon in your hand. So when the officers engage with Mr. Blake and he's combative and he retrieves a knife from his person, they have automatically have the authority to go from verbal commands to lethal force. But kids out there in podcast land, they had already went through all of them. Officer presence tried to give him verbal commands, tried to tase him twice, which he was able to resist, which means they tased him and he came back from, which is possible. Tasers aren't like in the movies. Some people don't drop automatically. I've been tased and that shit sucked. And I thought it was like 9 hours long and it was like 30 seconds or like 5 seconds on the video, right? But it felt like 9 hours. But they went through all of those and then drew their firearms when Mr. Blake retrieved a weapon off of his person and then tried to flee. And here's the thing. I don't have to have you facing me for me to shoot you. The law says that I have the duty, I have the responsibility, the duty, and the ability to engage a known, dangerous, fleeing felon. If there's a dangerous fleeing felon, then deadly force is authorized because I have a duty to protect the community. Whether he was going to get his vehicle or he's going to run off, it didn't matter. So deadly force was immediately authorized. And him running away and them shooting him was absolutely legal in every sense of the word. And I will tell you, I would have done the same exact thing. He had a weapon in his hand. And people that, well, it was a knife against a gun. I tell people all the time when I teach self-defense, this is an exercise I use. And I think you may have seen me do this before too. I make people stand around and I say, how many people carry a pocket knife? And I make them raise their hand. And I'll have most of the class because people do, right? Most of the class will raise their hand and they'll say they have a pocket knife. And I will tell them automatically, no matter what happens, you brought a weapon to the fight. Because you can kill somebody with that pocket knife. If I get it from you, I can 100% kill you with that pocket knife, right? So the fact that he had a knife on him and drew it while engaged with the police is a deadly force action. And when he fled, the officers had no reasonable belief that he wouldn't be dangerous outside of that incident, right? He'd already fought them. He'd been in a domestic dispute. He had a felony warrant for domestic violence and sexual assault. He pulled a weapon and he was trying to flee. My duty as an officer is to protect everybody out there. So Mr. Blake would get shot. So yet, for some reason, the cops are racist, and I do not understand that.
Yeah. Okay. Man, that's a lot to unpack. So I have a series of questions, and I'd like to dive into. Let's start from the beginning. So in the facts of the case, he has a warrant.
He has a warrant out for his arrest.
Yes, on two different matters, or two. They may have been the same situation. Right. And then you said that you were being, or I put you in this place in my mind. Driving, so the police were on the way to. You said it was a domestic because
domestic dispute.
That is a domestic dispute because he was
depending on what they say. Yes, it depends on the jurisdiction, right? And how the Century Code writes up a domestic.
So right? Domestic might mean something different in different places.
Yeah. Domestic assault, domestic dispute are two different things.
Okay, all right.
Right? You and I are in another world. We're a couple. Rochelle thinks we are anyway, right? But so we're a couple. We get an argument, and I get very verbally combative to you. If you call the 911, that's a domestic dispute.
Okay.
Police can respond. If you feel that I'm getting combative, and it's going to get worse if you call the cops when they show up, they're going to show up to a domestic dispute, not a domestic assault, because I haven't touched you yet.
Gotcha. All right.
Not domestic violence.
I like your definition of touch. I've not touched you yet. Yes, I've been touched by Mike. If anybody is interested, if you're not watching the show, it was a fist, just to be like touches with. All right. So going in, and that makes perfect sense to a guy that has zero training in that world from the perspective of being a law enforcement. That makes sense. Like, I want to be prepared. So I want to know that this guy has history, or gal, whatever.
I'm going to ask for his wants and warrants. We call it a 1027 and 28. Give me his wants and warrants. Give me his entire history. What's out there on him on the way in. I can ask for that.
Is it true that a 10-100 is taking a piss on the side of the road?
Not for us.
What about a 10-200? Is that a poop?
I don't think so. I wish it was though. Could be a 1 and a 2.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
I read that in the CB online thing one time. I'm
So
pretty
when I go back to work, because I'm not currently on the road right now because I'm about to have shoulder surgery.
Oh.
When I go back to work, I'm gonna tell my partners that, and we're gonna start using 10-100 and 10-200.
200. If it's 10-300, just give them a couple minutes because.
Or just give me a new pair of pants because something bad's on.
Oh boy! So I had other questions. Let's get to those. So okay, the big one, the big elephant for me in this whole discussion is, if he was getting away, if he was just trying to get away. So I make it sound like he's a victim, but that's not it. So I've got a knife and I'm the bad guy and I'm just getting in my car and I'm going to drive away and 7 bullets take me down and I'm dead. Like that seems like overkill, even in all of what you talked about, even though it's authorized. You didn't say required. You said it was authorized, which makes it legal, but it still seems like literal overkill. The dude had a knife. He was trying to take a car and he's just leaving. Like, why did you have to kill him? Why not wound him? Why not let him go and follow him?
He's not dead. So he's alive.
All right. All right.
He's paralyzed, but he's alive.
So, okay.
So, yep. So, but that's part of it, right? So overkill. It's not. You have 2 officers, 2 guns, 7 rounds. Both of them will fire, right? Even if one person fired. So on the range, we do a drill called a failure drill. It's 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. And I'll shoot you twice in the chest, and I don't wait at all. I bring my gun up and I shoot you 1 in the head because you could have armor on. Or the ballistics of my round, I don't hit anything lethal, right?
Right.
And you're going to keep moving. There's a Navy SEAL that was shot 21 times. Between gunfire and shrapnel wounds, he was wounded 27 times, still finished the fight, and walked himself to the extraction helicopter.
Are your dogs having
the dogs upstairs?
battle?
Yep, they're having a battle upstairs. So you guys are going to hear that on the YouTubes. So yeah, right. So just because it's the movie mentality, right? Person gets shot one time, they fly backwards off their feet and they're dead. A 9mm round, which most police departments use, is moving fairly quickly when it comes out, like 1,000 feet per second when it comes out of the barrel. And if you're using ball ammunition, it can pass through you and the person that is right next to you fairly quickly and may not knock you down. And the officers had no reasonable belief at the moment, no reason to believe that he was just leaving.
All right. All right.
Shown a propensity for violence. He fought the police. They jacked him twice with tasers, which he was able to recover from. He had a weapon, which means he pulled a weapon on police officers. And he's already a felon because there's a felony warrant out for his arrest. He's not convicted, so don't get your panties in the wad out there, listening land. But he has a felony warrant out for his arrest.
Yes.
So him pulling a weapon and then trying to leave, I can't logically assume as an officer that he's not up to nefarious activity when he leaves here.
Come on.
I have to defend and protect the rest of society out there. That is literally what I'm charged with. So you pull a weapon on me and we fight, I'm going to shoot you. And if I shoot you, I'm going to shoot you multiple times because 1 round doesn't normally drop somebody. It's 3.
Yeah.
Sometimes 4. Is he on something? Is he 400 pounds? Is it North Dakota where he's got 6 layers to include Carhartts on?
Right.
Right? This is obviously August in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but I don't know what he's on. The officers don't know what he's on.
Well, and
I can assume he might be on something because he's fighting police. Yeah. So if I shoot and my partner shoots, there could be 7 rounds in an individual. But at the end of the day, I don't care. My job is to defend the public from somebody who fought the police with a deadly weapon after they responded to a domestic dispute on somebody who has a felony warrant for domestic violence and sexual assault.
And it feels like I'm not, so don't take this as the slippery slope argument. Like I'm not saying because this happened, then automatically this happens. But there's a mentality of, in my mind, what is the difference then between he has a warrant and he acted like an asshole and getting to Judge Dredd? Like that mindset that, okay, I'm
People.
here, you have a warrant, and you're acting bad. Therefore, I deem you guilty. You die now.
Yeah, people, right? And the law, by the way, the law prohibits that. And it's Horatio's rule. People think that all cops are out there and all they want to do is shoot somebody. I know cops who have never pulled their gun out of their holster in an entire career. Sometimes you work in a jurisdiction where you don't have to. But just because you're an asshole doesn't mean I'm going to shoot you. The minute you fight me and pull a deadly weapon and try it during the fight, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to shoot you. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
You don't get to stab me for free simply because I'm a police officer. Sorry, that's not how it works.
That's a good point. Come on, I pay your taxes. I pay my taxes. I pay your salary. I get to stab you once.
I've actually heard this argument before. You guys should resist more. You should just automatically shoot somebody even if they have a weapon. Oh, so then I should die. And then everybody else in society is at risk because now this individual is free and clear to roam with said weapon, whatever they have, right? And whatever intent they have. It's okay for me to die, but it's not okay for me to defend myself or defend society from a dude who has a violent history, who fights police with a deadly weapon in his hand and has a felony warrant out for his arrest.
So Mike,
I'm the one that officer should die. Got it.
And obviously not. I mean, I get what you're saying.
I get what you're saying. I know it's not you. I'm just.
No, it's a mindset that needs to be addressed. So let me bring this home to my world. And Mike knows this. I am a process guy. I'm all about, policy, instructions. We've got rules, and as a society, that's what we're built on. The law of man. Like we're here. We've got this system in place. So I like systems. So let me ask you this then. Let's say that he had died, and in my mind, that's where I was already at. So he's
Okay. Yep. He's alive.
Yeah. But let's say he had died. Is there a system in place that still goes back to proclaim him guilty of what he had been?
If he's dead, no.
Yes. So that's where there's a big question for me. And I'm not saying we need to. We've got enough bureaucracy. I'm not saying we should go back to do that. But that almost feels like it's an easy out then, that we could say he had and I know that's not the case here, but he had warrants that were serious, and he was acting in a way that was dangerous, and now he's dead, and there's no ramification for that. Like, so you're the officer that shot.
There's always an investigation for every single time an officer fires the weapon.
But is it at the same level as
every single time an officer fires their weapon, there's an investigation, and usually it's internal affairs. And people are like, well, just cops investigating each other. I will tell you that the one thing cops hate more than anything else is dirty cops, because it makes our job exponentially effing harder to do. So we don't like them either. And every IA that I've ever dealt with, and in my job in the federal agency, we call the Inspector General, they do a fantastic job. And if you are wrong, dude, you are wrong, right? And there's a whole different discussion we can have about police unions and hiring processes and all of and litigation, right? Because the police department could deem this guy at fault, fire him. And if the union believes it was at fault, they sue the department. And there are times that officers get their job back. I'm not a fan of unions for anybody out there, by the way. Jim and I have had this discussion a lot. They had their place in like the turn of the 20th century, but pretty done with them.
Yeah, I made a note.
That's a whole different.
I just need to say this, Mike. Listeners, you can expect that to be a future episode, and I'm just going to put this out there now. I don't know, we could go a couple different ways. Police union, just that idea and what that system looks like is fascinating to me. If we want to talk about unions, by God, I would love to drill down into that. So that could be something. If there's more interest, especially, we could bring that to the forefront. But I've already made note that's going to be coming up for sure. So now back to reality.
So they do an investigation. Like if I fire my weapon, I have to go to a shooting board. And the shooting board determines whether it was just or not. And it's people detached from me. For me, it's people at our headquarters. And they will take my gun from me immediately. I'm de-armed and I'm taken off of casework or the road or whatever it is that I'm doing, and I have to wait until their ruling comes back. And if it's, by the way, if the shooting is deemed non-justified, the officer can can be prosecuted, and it's happened, right? And then there's a whole thing about qualified immunity and why people don't like that, and we could have another discussion about qualified immunity. But a qualified immunity allows an officer to operate without really the threat of oppressive civil litigation. There's a level of autonomy that if the officer believes that he is operating within reasonable standards for a reasonable person would believe was happening at the time, he should be covered, right? And there's a big argument about qualified immunity too. And again, we can break that down in another podcast. There's a lot going on with this one incident. And really what I wanted to talk about was the fact that people lost their shit over a headline without knowing the facts of what actually happened. Nobody deserves to be shot 7 times. Okay, you obviously don't understand ballistics or what it's like in a deadly situation, or how quickly it can go the other way, and how many times people have been shot and still fought through, right?
Right. And it speaks to, well, a number of things.
It's not a goddamn movie. That's not how it works.
We've talked about media and sensationalism, maybe not quite to death yet, but that horse is bleeding. We've beaten it a little bit. But
it's media bias. This entire damn thing is media bias, and people bought into it, and they burned a damn city.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to, this goes back to the Fortitude book I talked about, the idea of the victim mentality and the mindset that automatically we as a society have decided that whoever is the victim is who deserves our attention. And
yep.
For however we got here and wherever we're going from here, it's a thing that if we don't address, we will just continue to perpetuate, and it's going to be difficult to have any decent system within that structure, I believe. So that's my take on it. This guy got shot. He's paralyzed now, and his life is dramatically changed. Whether he deserves it or not, I'm not here to judge. That's why, and not
once in this entire conversation did I say he deserved it. Right?
Yeah, certainly. I'm not speaking to you.
No, I just want to make sure people out there in podcast land know that.
But and that's why this is my point. I joke a lot about paying taxes, and I joke about it because it's something I feel comfortable in. Like I always talk about, I want my taxes to go to Mike's and people like Mike's vacations. Like that's what I want to pay for specifically. However, in all reality, that's what I pay my taxes for, is for somebody else to make that hard fucking decision, because I don't want to face it. I don't even want to be involved in it. That's part of the reason that I did not choose a profession like Mike's. I don't want to have to face that. And Mike is capable of it. I firmly believe that. I don't believe, and this is perfectly, yeah, you're welcome. And this is the raw part for me. I don't believe that every law enforcement official is at the same level Mike is, and that's what scares the shit out of me. There are some that are more in tune and more capable. There are some that are inept, which isn't great, but every career has their ineptitude, and there are some bad ones out there, and that's what fucks it up for everybody. Just like there, and now this might be where we diverge, Mike and I, because there are criminals out there that you could classify the same, that aren't following the law, but they are they're not going to cause someone to get shot, and they're not going to cause society to go to hell in a handbasket, but they are not. I speed. I'm one of them, right? I go.
That's where officer discretion comes in, though. How many people have I let off with a warning?
Yes, and that's where the human comes in, and I'm not capable. This is my point. That I'm not capable of making that decision. Everyone gets a speeding ticket, or no one does. I'm not good at that differentiating. So, thank God for the ones out there that are doing it right, and I pray for mercy and wisdom for those that are out there not doing it right. Something needs to change there, and I'm not capable of making that change. I don't know what it looks like. What's
crazy is it's training. It's good people, good hiring processes and training, right? And the hiring process for most police departments is astronomically long. And a lot of them include polygraphs and background checks and 16 to 22 week academies. You don't get hired and automatically get a gun. It's a long ass process, like 6 to 8 months, right? But people want to defund the police, and they're screaming about cops getting too much money and all that stuff. You know where the first part of the budget that gets cut in any governmental organization, local, county, state, or federal?
School.
It's the training budget.
All right.
It's the training budget.
All right.
If you don't like what your officers are doing right now and the level they're at, you cut their fucking budget, you're really not going to like where they're at, because we don't get a lot of training as it is because of time constraints and budget and all that stuff. The first thing that gets cut in a department is training, hands down. So again, if you don't like where they're at now, you go ahead and cut their budget and see how well that works out for you, right? Defund them. I want to see my neighbor on patrol. That's going to be great. It's going to work out fabulously. But the great thing about law enforcement is it's made up of people. The bad thing about law enforcement is it's made up of people. I could say the same thing about teaching, about medicine. I mean, about the priesthood,
about life,
religion, about life. You
humankind,
Pick a career. It's the same thing. We are in a position of trust, so we are held to a higher standard, and I 100% believe we should be held to a higher standard because of the position of trust we have in society. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I have no issue with every time if I have to fire my weapon, there'd be a shooting board. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I think there should be a layer of oversight. What I have a problem with is all of you idiots out there in society who automatically jump to conclusions based on a fucking CNN headline that has nothing to do with the truth. And then you burn a city down because of it. That's the issue I have. Yeah. People automatically filleted the officers without the facts. And on the other side, people automatically vilified the suspect without the facts, right? That's my problem. You out there doing it, that's the damn problem. That's why Kenosha, Wisconsin's burning. That's why Portland and Seattle and Chicago and Minneapolis and Houston, Austin, that's not Houston, but Austin, that's why they're burning, is you're the problem.
Well, there you go.
I had to get that out of my system.
Get that poison out, man.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it is a contentious issue, but people don't want to wait for the facts. They want to make their decisions on feeling. Do I want to shoot somebody? Absolutely not. Have I? Yes, I have. And I believe that every time you have to shoot somebody, it takes a piece of your soul with you. And you can ask anybody who's ever been in that situation, and I bet you that carries a badge, they will tell you the exact same thing. Or anybody who's ever been in combat that has had to do it will tell you the same thing. It takes a bit of your soul. And there's some bravado that we can use, and dark humor is how is a coping mechanism for both the military and law enforcement. We talked about that on our ride. Yeah. And if you don't, it will consume you, right? So people aren't out there looking to shoot somebody. And that's a prevailing thought too, that cops are just out there looking to shoot somebody. Most cops never fire their weapon in the line of duty for their entire career outside of the firing range. And they don't want to shoot anybody. They want to serve their community. They want to protect good people. And that's why they wear the badge. Okay. And every time you have to pull that trigger, you absolutely shatter a piece of your soul. So stop being so flippant in your condemnation of law enforcement from your computer keyboard, sitting in a comfortable house under the protection that I fucking provide.
Well, there you go. And I know that most of the people that listen regularly to the Gray Man podcast are probably not the ones Mike's talking to, but this is another opportunity to share this out with maybe some folks that need to hear it, and we could get those reviews Mike was talking about.
God. And I get that I'm swearing a little more than I normally do, but this, I try to be as unemotional when we talked about the facts of the case as possible. But now that we're in the opinion side of it, I'm going to give you my opinion. Right. And I get that people 100% disagree with me, and I don't care. Because if you want to make a difference, if you want to make a difference in law enforcement, and go to a damn academy and get a badge and get out there and patrol the streets and make a difference in law enforcement. Yeah. But until you do that, don't tell me how to do my goddamn job and tell me that I'm wrong. If you've never been in a deadly force encounter and realize that we're literally talking fractions of a second to make a deadly force decision that these officers have to live with for the rest of their life. The rest of their life, by the way, against a violent felony warrant having individual that had a deadly weapon in his hand and fought police. They had a split second to make the decision to safeguard everybody else out there. And you, in the safety of your house, get the Monday morning quarterback that for the rest of their natural lives and tell them exactly what they should have done when you have never been in that situation.
So I get the sense, no way in hell I could prove this, and I don't have studies to back it up. I have the sense that a lot of that comes from folks that have my qualifications, right? That I've not studied, I've not prepared, I don't understand the ins and outs. I mean, I've read The Art of War, like that's as close as I've gotten. But I see a headline, I read a story, and I won't lie. Years ago, there was a time when I'd read the story and think, okay, that's it, that's my opinion now, and it's changed. I've gone to I've taken courses, I've read, I've studied, I've had intercourse with people like Mike and others, and so I think I feel like I think of things in a different way, and I hope to hell that 10 years from now I'm more able to do that. Like I want to continue that process. So I feel like I get a sense of why someone would feel that way. Like, well, this is a news source that tells me this is how I should feel, so I'm going to bolster that. And we've been raised in that. We're both Gen Xers, so I get that idea. Like this, the TV told me, so that's what must be true. The computer told me, so now I know how I'm supposed to feel because I believe in that party or that organization or whatever it is. So I have to feel that way. I want to encourage that. I want to build that up, and that's how we can easily buy into it. Absolutely a wimpy and lazy way to go about it, and it's reality.
You are the exception rather than the rule, because you will take time and pause and wait for the facts to come out. And it's a learned skill. Like you said, you've learned that over time. I think college has a lot to do with that, though, right? College, for the most part, academic learning breeds critical thinking for the most part.
Right. It can.
For the most part. Right. We've had that conversation before, too. But academic learning should breed critical thinking. And so you look at the world differently. And you don't have to have a college degree to learn critical thinking. You can learn that on your own. You can read and dissect things and all of that stuff, but that doesn't happen the vast majority of the time. And that really is my issue with the incident involving the officers and Jacob Blake, is that society immediately, because they wanted this, they wanted a specific outcome, they automatically allowed this to be that outcome. And for those of you out there who got your panties in a wad with Mr. George Floyd, and we've talked about this before, right? I want you to go out and I want you to read the actual publicly available autopsy report from Mr. George Floyd. And you will understand why that is nowhere, that his story is absolutely nowhere in the media anymore. It is a dead issue. No pun intended, maybe pun intended.
A little bit.
Yeah. You'll understand why nobody talks about him anymore. But people are using that to burn Portland. It's like 100 days of being burned. It's over 90 days now of violence. I mean, there are deaths out there. The people, I talked about this, I think it was a week or two ago, we talked about this, that we've allowed the alt left, and that's what Antifa and BLM are. They're the far alt left, to run rampant in cities and burn them and loot and assault people with everyday items and firearms and explosives, and just crazy amount of stuff. And I said a couple weeks ago, this will only go on for less than a month, and you're gonna see the alt-right show up. Militias are gonna start showing up, and there's gonna be violence. Remember, we had this conversation, and there's gonna be violence on the streets. Well, guess the fuck what's happening right now?
But that's not what's talked about in.
No, because it's allowed to go unchecked for this long, because nobody wants to say that BLM and Antifa is wrong. Even though they're engaging in domestic terrorism, right?
Yes. And
so now other people are showing up because they're tired of it and they're fighting back. And then we can do a whole nother episode about Mr. Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse, and his Kenosha hat trick with shooting 3 people and all that stuff. We can talk all about that. It's completely linked to Jacob Blake.
All right. So.
And the discussion we had about the alt-right finally showing up and pushing back. And not that I'm an alt-right guy, all of you out there with your heads exploding that are on the left or the center left who are listeners. I'm not saying I'm an alt-right guy. I'm not a big fan of vigilantism at all. Go back to our episode 2 of the Boogaloo and listen. I'm just saying I called it. I knew it was going to.
I think that would be a fantastic follow-up to today's episode, and I feel like a bit of a broken record by saying please give us some feedback on that, folks that are up to speed on the episodes. If this is something we should continue next week, in the back of my mind, I was expecting this might go there anyway. There was one other thing, Mike, you mentioned early on about a skateboard. Is that something that we could bring into this discussion, or is that for a different one?
That's actually deals with Kyle Rittenhouse, and he had a short barrel carbine rifle, and shot 3 people, 2 fatally. One of them attacked him with a skateboard, one with a brick to his head, and the other one actually had a firearm in his arm or his hand when he was shot. And so the headlines immediately said, 17-year-old with assault rifle, a rifle shoots and kills unarmed person with skateboard. That was the headline. Now, Antifa actually has videos out there teaching people how to beat someone to death with a skateboard.
Really?
Yes. And if you don't think you can kill somebody with a skateboard, you don't understand real violence. Right?
You can kill someone with your bare hands, so don't tell me that giving me more leverage and something with metal in it isn't going
with an edge and metal can't kill somebody, right? But that's the headline, and that's he shot an unarmed man. Fuck you, he did not. The guy was getting hit with a skateboard. Now, we can go back and talk about the legalities of what he did and why he was there and all of that stuff in a separate podcast. But if you just take that snippet, which people love to do, and say he killed an unarmed man, you are a moron when it comes to force and deadly force and violent encounters. Literally, I will tell you, you are a fucking moron. You do not understand deadly force encounters.
Right. And that's just lazy media and sensation.
Yep. And lazy people.
Yes, right. Because I mean, any situation, if okay, so Mike's evil twin were in a scuffle with law enforcement with no weapon, and the law enforcement said he was coming after us, we had to kill him, I would believe it, because Mike can do things with his hands, baby, that most people can't. Like you can kill someone without a weapon, and you're capable of that. And there are others out there that are even more capable of it. So 100%. An unarmed person being killed by law enforcement doesn't mean that there wasn't a threat. And I think that's the lazy part of it. We have to know, how did we get to that point? What information, what facts led to the point that person was.
But nobody wants that anymore, right? Take a 5'4" female, 135-pound officer against a 300-pound unarmed suspect.
Well, my question is, why is she a law enforcement in law enforcement?
Because she has the right to be. Maybe she has a calling, right?
Yes, I agree, but that had to be my question. Right?
Yeah. She had the calling. She has a right to be a badge. She wants to serve and protect. She's in an incident where she gets a call to some place where there's a 250-pound, somebody that outweighs her by 120 pounds. And they get in an altercation. Do you think the fact that he's unarmed matters?
Right.
He could kill her literally with his hands. And Jim's right. And it's not, I hate talking about this stuff because it makes me feel like a braggadocio, or it makes me sound like I'm tooting my own horn. But you absolutely can kill somebody with your bare hands. And it's not as easy as it is in the movies, but it is very possible. I also know how to get a gun out of a holster fairly quickly and then kill you with your own gun, right? So if my evil twin was out there, and there are people out there that are very evil that train just as much as I do. They're out there, man. So, and if he's unarmed, I'm still shooting him. If he goes for my gun, you're eating 1,000 feet per second, 9mm rounds. You're eating several of them the minute you go for my gun.
Yeah.
Because I'm authorized to do it. And if you get my gun, I die. And then you run off with my gun, and I don't know who else is going to die.
Yeah.
I have a duty to serve and protect the community. And if you're in the way of me doing that, then I'm sorry, you're getting shot. And I'm not going to sleep just fine tonight, right? Somebody breaks in my house and threatens my family, I will kill you and sleep fine the next night. If I'm on the job and I get in a scuffle and God forbid I have to fire my gun in the line of duty, I'm not going to sleep fine that night. That takes a bit of your soul away from you. But people need to stop being so flippant about the way they look at the news. That's what it is. That's what CNN said, or that's what Fox said, or that's what MSNBC said, or that's what Reuters or AP News or BBC pick something. Obviously that has to be what happened. They wouldn't lie. They will lie every single day because they're there to sell clicks and viewership.
Yes.
And they are going to put a headline up that appeals to a certain demographic that subscribes to that media outlet. That's the way it works. And the fact that people will set an entire city on fire and wreak looting and burning and physical violence over that without knowing the truth, shame on you, America. Shame on you for allowing that to happen. You are the problem for allowing it to happen. It's like a toddler throwing a tantrum that you just let throw a tantrum for the rest of their goddamn life. I mean, I 100% believe in the right to protest in the First Amendment, right? I 100% believe in the right to protest in the First Amendment. Peaceful. First Amendment says you have the right to assemble peaceably and petition for redress. It does not say that you have the right to loot or burn or assault anybody. And the minute you do that, it's domestic terrorism. Everybody out there listening, go ahead and look up the FBI definition of domestic terrorism, and it will fit BLM and it will fit Antifa. So you don't get to do that anymore.
Every time you mention domestic terrorism, I think of it's crazy, but my motorcycle ride to work Friday. Every time I wash my motorcycle, which I had to after our ride, water gets somewhere in my system and it causes it to backfire and spit and chug all the way to work. And I'm always afraid I'm going to get arrested for domestic terrorism because it sounds like a freaking gun going off. So anyway, I had to get that out of my head so we can move on. And I also wanted to use that as a bit of a transition because I can see Mike's that one vein that he has that throbs sometimes is getting a little bit close to rupture. So listen, everybody that's out there, as always, we really appreciate your support. And this is one subject we saw a lot of chatter coming into today that there was some excitement about it. I'll be perfectly honest. From me to Mike and me to the listeners, part of my role is to make sure we don't pigeonhole into just talking about this because I feel like that could get us into just decompressing every week, and we want this to be a little bit more than that. But I think it's an important thing to talk about. There are some important opinions, I believe, that Mike has that need to be shared and discussed. And let's find some folks out there that maybe want to oppose and come up with some other opinions and so forth. But the most important thing is we want the facts out there. We want to talk about what's happening, and we also want it to be entertaining. So we'll continue doing this as long as we find folks that are willing to take part in that. And part of what we do on the Gray Man podcast is something called Shitty Choices. And we've had a week now of Mike sitting on a shitty choice, which sounds uncomfortable. But Mike had the option or was given the options last time. The last show, the three choices. The third one is always, just to give some insights, the third one is always lose the feeling in your genitals anytime your significant other is aroused, right? So Mike always has that choice. The two that I gave him, I actually took one away. And the first one was get an erection every time you hear your own name. And as soon as I said it, I realized, yeah, Mike's just gonna walk around like Mike. That's it. That's all you're gonna hear from him. Or the other one, and this is the one that I kept, right? To giggle like a schoolgirl whenever someone fires a weapon. And it came down to those two, and I actually gave Mike a pass since we were about to go on sabbatical. I didn't want him to feel like he had to choose between those two. But really, you're down to, you're gonna giggle like a schoolgirl when someone fires a weapon, or are you gonna lose a feeling in your genitals whenever your significant other is aroused? And now that other vein is thrumping on his forehead. Now this is, man, I really put you in a spot.
This is the hardest choice yet in the podcast in 10 episodes that I've had to make.
Well, this was 9. That was only 9 so far. So yeah,
that's true. Well, this is number 10. So now I got to reveal it. I will tell you, this is the first time Jim has ever backed me in a corner where I have had to choose losing the feeling in my genitalia every time my significant other is aroused. Because really, I'm the only one that loses out on that. She's going to be fine.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to laugh like a schoolgirl every time somebody shoots. I just was on the range for 2 hours, and I fired 300 rounds, man. I was on the range yesterday for 2 hours. I went through 300 rounds doing drills. That's 300 schoolgirl giggles just for me.
Imagine like how tight your belly would be, though. You'd have like a 20 pack.
Abs of steel, man. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I can't do it, man. I gotta go with
that's
three.
It. All right,
yeah, first time you've.
All right, I feel like like I've succeeded, like I've won the podcast. And I am terrible. Like at the same time, I feel terrible because I want you to be happy. But
well, congratulations, sir.
yes, exactly. All right. Well, so that one's in the books, and today's I wasn't sure about how to approach this one. You will still have the option to lose your genital feeling when your significant other is aroused, but this one, and there's a character that came to mind that made me think of this one. Here's what's going to happen going forward. You're going to cut out the section of your body from your hip to your knee. So you're going to lose that. You're essentially going to go from waist to like where your knee would be, or you're going to lose from your knee to your ankle. And that's how you live life from here going forward. So there's either you're going to miss the top half of your legs or the bottom half of your legs. Or, I mean, you could take the easy way out this time, and since you don't feel anything anyway. And
yeah, it's good. Nope, I'm not going to take that one again. That was a tough choice, man. I agonized for that for 2 friggin' weeks, man. That was terrible.
I wanted to make it a little bit easier this time around, but still, like, I imagine this is where it's funny to me. You're going to be still doing jujitsu with either your
tiny little ass legs, man.
Your thighs or your calves, which are important for you to hold on, or the bigger bones, littler, or
by the way,
like what?
Well, so super easy choice for me. I'm not going to walk around with chicken legs. I'll have feet attached to the bottom of my quads, and I'll be short, but they'll be super powerful.
But
super powerful legs. Hey, my dog's downstairs, and they are fighting.
Not like that choice. Your dogs think you're stupid for choosing that. But
I put myself on mute, and then I yelled at them, so now they're gone.
All right, so we're good. All right.
Yeah, well, I will 100% lose the bottom part of my leg.
And now
my feet attached where my knees are.
Yes, and now I can reveal what made me think of that was the King of the Hill, Hank's dad, had no ankles. And I imagined you as Hank Hill at one point, or Hank Hill's dad. I can't remember his name, but anyway, that's the picture that came to mind, and that's how this shitty choice came about.
I can't go to the dance. I got the gout.
Fantastic. There's always been rumors it might come back. It hasn't yet, but dog. All right.
That's a good. I appreciate the pass on the choices today. That last one was tough, man.
So here's another thought. Maybe we need to come up with a new third choice now that you've had to choose that one. Maybe.
Well, all right, podcast land. Let us know what you think. Should we come up with a new third choice since I've already had to choose it? Let us know on Facebook.
Yes, sir. That'd be fantastic. And so, listen, I know, Mike, this has been a very passion-infused hour that you've gone through, and I know that you had probably another 3 or 4 hours worth of things to talk about, and we probably stopped you in the middle of a couple of thoughts. So maybe a little bit longer if you'd like to do a wrap up, but some final thoughts on America burning.
You guys, you've got to take a minute and sit back and wait for the facts in every situation, whether we're talking about the suspect or the law enforcement folks or whatever else is happening. You have to wait for facts. This country is amazing. It's the greatest, truest, freest country on earth, but we are going to absolutely destroy ourselves if we cannot pull our head out of our ass and stop making decisions based on feeling and not fact. Our cities are literally burning at our own hands because we allow these groups to go in there and do it and do nothing about it, and you support them based on a feeling that you get off of a headline that is completely and utterly inaccurate and written to get that very feeling out of you because it sells clicks and viewership. You are playing into the hands of everybody burning cities, and you are complicit in their actions by doing so. So wake up, America, please.
All right. I don't think it could be said any better. And as always, thank you so much for listening to the Gray Man podcast. We'll be here again next week about the same time. I definitely want everybody to stick around and watch how I come up with the number 11, because a digit that comes to mind that might make it happen. But really appreciate where we're at. Mike talked about the place where we put the podcast, tells us when we've hit certain things, and just in the time that when we've hit certain targets and so forth, and just in the time that we've been doing this, We've surpassed a lot of what I thought that this could become. So really appreciate it. Thanks for welcoming us into your ears, your brains, wherever you're putting us. And we'll keep on going. By the way, one final thing. I just have to say this. Mike talked about the alt-right. This new do that I have, for those watching, I've shaved my head, and it has nothing to do with politics. I am not a skinhead. I am just a guy that got sick of having hair, and appreciate the new look. So that's all we've got. And Mike, we will see you next time around.
Check you guys later. Thanks for listening.
Find us on Facebook, YouTube, and your podcast app at The Gray Man Podcast. All rights reserved 2020. Skunk and Gator Creations.